Chapter 1. The Widow in the Mansion. Section 1. The Return. The train screeched to a halt under a gray sky, its wheels grinding like distant thunder. Lena Marwood stepped down onto the weather-worn platform of Greystone Halt. Duffel bags slung over her shoulders, the sea salt smell of years in uniform still clinging to her raincoat. The countryside was quiet, too quiet. A church bell tolled somewhere beyond the line of trees, and not a single person came forward to greet her. She drew a breath. 4 years of war, deserts, codes, a dead fiancé whose plane had disappeared into nothing. All of it behind her now. Ahead the vale, the village of Marwood Hollow, was tucked between rising hills, protected from progress and sunlight. It hadn't changed much since she was a girl. Still the same warped cobbled lanes, the same crooked eaves of the grocer's shop, the same sagging fence posts along their farm's perimeter. But what had changed was the silence. A different kind of quiet war-broken, post-rationed, grief-pinned. She trudged up the gravel path toward the house that had once seemed timeless. The White Hollow. Its white paint was flaking. The roof tiles had shifted. The garden, once her mother's pride, was half devoured by weeds. Ivy climbed the front windows like fingers trying to pull something down. The door creaked open before she knocked. "Some?" Her mother stood there, thin, faded, fragile. Marnie Marwood looked like she had been exhumed from another century, wrapped in an old wool shawl. Eyes wide and watery. "Lena," her voice cracked. "You're home." The words clattered awkwardly between them. They embraced stiffly. The house swallowed her up. All must and dust and cold hearths. Lena dropped her bag, scanning the sitting room. Her father's armchair still in place, though he died a decade ago. The faded watercolor of the marshlands. The cracked clock that hadn't ticked since the blackout of '42. Nothing has changed, and that was the problem. "I made up your room," Marnie said, eyes darting. "Though I had to move the old boxes in from the attic when the ceiling started leaking." Lena nodded. "It's fine, Mum. Over a cup of weak tea?" The silence thickened again, until Marnie finally said it. "He left it all to her." Lena looked up. "Silas," her mother whispered, as if his name could still summon thunder. "Your uncle. He married her barely 2 weeks before he died in that awful blitz. And no one even knew. No one." Lena stared at her mother. "She has everything. All of it. Every shilling, the company shares, the house at Brackenridge Hall, the overseas accounts. Everything." A sharp breath escaped her. There wasn't a will. There was, but it was from before the marriage. Once he wed her, Marnie's voice quivered with rage, and something else, fear. It invalidated the old one. That girl has everything now. And we... She looked away, voice bitter. "Have nothing." The silence that followed was brutal. Lena remembered Silas well, her mother's older brother, sharp-minded, war profiteer, industrialist, widower, larger than life, and just as theatrical. He had never had children, but he'd always sent checks, paid for Lena's schooling, helped with the farm, promised to sort them out properly once the war ended. Now he was gone, and in his place, the girl. "What's her name?" Lena asked. "Isla Vane," Marnie said with disgust. "A stage actress. Or so she says. I've seen pictures. She's barely 25. Met Silas on a boat from Buenos Aires. Some kind of charity event. If you believe that. Lena rose and paced to the window. And she lives at Brackenridge now. Yes. With her brother? Lena turned slowly. Brother. Damon Vane. An Irishman. Too smooth. Too clever by half. He answers the door. Writes the letters. Manages the estate. She never left the house without him. The room grew colder somehow. Do they know who you are? Lena asked. I wrote once. Polite. Asked if there might be any provision for family. She never replied. A solicitor did. Said all inquiries should be directed to their legal representative. That's all. Lena looked out across the fields. Fog crept in over the hills like a ghost returning from war. There were bills stacked on the mantel, unopened. A note from the local butcher saying credit had been stopped. Her mother's wrists were thin as twigs. Her boots patched with tape. This wasn't the homecoming she'd imagined. Lena had left as a girl, full of energy, full of dreams. Now, at 26, she returned a woman with ghosts in her eyes and a bone-deep weariness that no warm bed could cure. We'll manage, she said at last. Her mother flinched. I'll find work. I'll speak to Rowan again. He offered before the war, but her voice faltered. Rowan Cade, the farmer's son next door. Steady, reliable, still unmarried. According to the last letter she'd received during her deployment in Egypt. But that was years ago, and she was no longer the same girl who'd kissed him under the apple tree behind the barn. Lena, her mother said suddenly, her voice hollow. There's something you should know. Something I haven't told you. Lena turned. There's someone asking questions in the village, Marnie whispered. Someone who's not supposed to exist. A pause. Someone who might ruin everything for that woman in the mansion. Lena felt the first curl of something unfamiliar. Hope no, not hope. Danger, and then, quietly. Who is he? They say he's Isla's first husband. Section 2. The Mansion and the Shadow. Lena stood at the edge of the iron gate, gazing up at Brackenridge Hall. It was just as she remembered it, too new to be historic, too bold to be charming. A modern white edifice perched like a conqueror over the Vale's time-worn cottages. The architect had designed it with a flair for steel angles and brutal symmetry, a house that made no apology for its presence. Her uncle, Silas Marwood, had called it his citadel, and now it belongs to a stranger with her name etched in deeds and banking ledgers. Isla Vane Marwood, the girl widow, the heiress. Lena hesitated before ringing the bell. She had no appointment. She wasn't even sure why she'd come. Maybe it was angry, or curious, or the cold pressure of her mother's unpaid bills. The bell gave a mechanical chime, almost apologetic. A minute passed, then another. Finally, the door opened. He stood there, tall, unsmiling, dark. Damon Vane? The brother. His eyes registered her face in an instant, cool, perceptive, as if cataloging her blood type and moral temperature in a single glance. He had the lean intensity of a soldier, but the laziness of a man who never had to run. Yes, he said, not unfriendly, not welcoming either. I'm Lena Marwood. She said, straightening, Silas was my uncle. I live at White Hollow. He didn't blink. Yes, I know who you are. There was something about his voice, quiet, dry, faintly mocking. I wanted to offer my condoles, she continued, though the lie tasted metallic. I've just returned from overseas. I never got to meet Isla. A long pause. Then she's resting. Lena let that hang in the air. I can come back another time. But Damon opened the door wider. Come in, briefly. She followed him into the foyer. The hall was pristine, sparse, elegant. Abstract paintings lined the walls in colors too sharp to be comforting. A scent of white lilies and polish hung in the air. Cloying. Silence reigned, not the peaceful kind, but something else. Guarded. Heavy. She doesn't receive visitors often, Damon said, leading her into a sitting room with glass walls looking over the damp countryside. I'm not a visitor, Lena said. Then what are you? That stopped her. She opened her mouth, and before she could decide what to say, another voice floated into the room like a breeze too soft to close the door against. Isa. She's family. Isla stood in the doorway, draped in pale green silk. She looked younger than Lena expected. Not 26 more, like 19, preserved in sadness and perfume. Her hair was black, her eyes enormous. Her skin as pale as porcelain and just as likely to shatter. I'm so glad you came, she said, stepping in barefoot across the hardwood floor. I've wanted to meet all of you, but I didn't know if I'd be welcome. She extended a delicate hand. Lena took it. Cold fingers, feather-light grip. There was something blank behind the eyes, something afraid. My mother said Silas died just a day after returning to England. Lena said. Ela nodded slowly. We'd planned to come down here straight away, but he had meetings, always meetings, and then the air raid. Her voice trailed off. Damon poured a whiskey. For himself? We were all shocked, Lena said, keeping her voice even. No one even knew you were married. Isla looked down. It was fast. He said he didn't want to wait. He said the war made time feel strange. That waiting was a waste. And just like that, Lena could picture it. The old industrialist, gruff and charming. The young woman on the deck of a ship. War in the background. A proposal wrapped in champagne and urgency. A signature. A marriage. A bomb. How long did you know him? Lena asked. Damon spoke instead. That's hardly relevant now. Lena looked at him. Is it? He smiled without warmth. The dead don't appreciate interrogation. Lena's jaw tightened. Neither do the living, it seems. Please, Isla said suddenly, her hand trembling as she reached for a cup that wasn't there. Let's not argue. There was a long, loaded pause. I'm sorry, Lena said quickly. I didn't mean to intrude. No, Isla said. You have every right. I know what people must think of me. That I took everything. That I came here with a plan. Did you? The question came out before Lena could stop herself. Isla blinked. Lips parted in surprise. Damon's glass meets the table with a controlled clink. People in this village talk. Lena said, they say you came from nowhere. That Silas never made a new will. That you've shut out everyone who counts on him for. Enough, Damon said. The word was soft, but final. Lena stood. Maybe this was a mistake. No, Isla said quietly. You deserve answers. Damon's shoulders stiffened. Isla, but she held up a hand. I know what it looks like, she said, her voice thin. I didn't expect to inherit everything. I didn't ask for it. I wasn't even sure how much there was. Damon helped with all the papers, the letters, the bank people. He's been managing things because I haven't been well. You seem well enough to live in a mansion, Lena said before she could stop herself. Isla looked wounded. Truly so. Damon rose from his seat. I think it's time you leave. Of course, Lena said coldly, but as she stepped out into the hall, Isla followed. At the door, she whispered, there was someone watching the house last night. Lena froze. What do you mean? A man. Standing by the gate. Damon chased him off. But he looked familiar. A chill licked the back of Lena's neck. Do you know who it was? Isla shook her head. Not exactly, but I think I've seen him before. Years ago, in Cape Town. Lena stared at her, and Isla whispered, I think it might have been my first husband. Section 3. The Stranger at the Party. The invitations had gone out by postcard. Nothing formal. Just a quiet gathering at Lionel Marwood's cottage on the Ridge Tea. Sherry and sandwiches. As if post-war austerity hadn't clung to every corner of the village like mildew. But in truth, everyone knows why they were there. To see the widow and to size up her brother. Lena arrived with her mother just before 5. The sitting room already buzzed with contained tension, filtered through polite conversation. Francis and Jeremy Marwood sat near the fireplace, immaculate as always, their eyes scanning the room behind faintly amused smiles. Rowan Cade stood near the bar trolley, rugged in tweed, swirling a glass of cider, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. And then she saw them, Isla and Damon. They stood side by side near the window, like royal portraiture, he sleek in dark gray. She pale and soft in lavender silk, her hair coiled neatly, a small diamond brooch at her throat. She looked every bit the tragic young widow, but there was something brittle beneath the surface. Damon's presence beside her was both shielding and possessive. He caught Lena's gaze across the room and raised an eyebrow. She didn't smile. Don't you dare start, Marnie hissed beside her. I wasn't going to. You were always a bad liar. The hostess, Lionel's wife Claire, flitted by with a tray of buttered scones, her laugh brittle, eyes nervous. Frances swept toward Lena with her usual theatrical poise. My dear, she murmured, have you seen the way he watches her Damon? It's like he's rehearsing ownership. Maybe he already owns everything, Lena said under her breath. Before Frances could reply, the door opened, and the temperature dropped. He stepped into the room like he didn't belong in any room at all. Tall, weathered, tanned skin, scars along the jawline like punctuation, clothes slightly too large, as if borrowed. But his eyes held something Lena couldn't name. A ghost, a reckoning. People turned towards him, as if drawn by instinct. Lionel approached, forced a greeting. You're Edward Lang, the man said. His voice was low, rough. He didn't smile. Apologies for crashing your gathering. I'm new to the area. Rented a room in the village. Heard there was a party. A few polite chuckles fluttered through the room. Frances narrowed her eyes. How delightfully forward, she said. Jeremy Marwood stepped forward, offering a drink. Damon was already moving toward the newcomer, his stance controlled but unmistakably alert. We weren't expecting guests from the village. Not from the village, Lang said. from much farther. Farther, Isla's voice cracked slightly. Lang turned to her, and for a moment, only a second, the room fell utterly silent. Isla's teacup trembled. Then Lang bowed slightly. "Ma'am." Lena felt it in her gut. It was him, whoever he was. Isla knew him. Damon stepped in. "I think you're mistaken. This is a private gathering." Lang's eyes didn't leave Isla. "Of course," he smiled. There was no warmth in it, only the shadow of something else. "I just wanted to pay my respects," he said, "to the family of the late Mr. Marwood." That did it. Eyes snapped between him and Isla like rifle fire. Jeremy's brow furrowed. "You knew Silas." Lang's smile sharpened. "Only by name. His widow made the papers, didn't she?" Damon stepped forward again. "I think it's time you leave." Lang's expression didn't change. He took a step back, tipped his imaginary hat. No harm meant, and then, just before turning, he looked straight at Isla and said, "It's good to see you again, Rosie." The silence that followed could have drowned a room of screaming children. Island went white. Lena stared. Damon's hands clenched, but Edward Lang simply turned and walked out, closing the door behind him like the end of a war. It was half an hour before anyone spoke of it. Conversations resume in stuttering fragments. Francis, mercifully, took control of the tea table. Jeremy whispered urgently to Lionel in the corner. Damon sat beside Isla, his hand clamped over hers like a restraining order. Lena hovered near the bookcase, watching. She'd seen Isla's face when he said Rosie. Not confusion, not recognized. Fear. It wasn't just a name. It was a memory. And Damon had reacted like a man seeing a ghost, rising through the floorboards. Not disbelieving. No doubt. Anticipation. Outside the window, a storm gathered quietly over the hills. "I shall know." Rowan. Cade approached her, face unreadable. "Well," he muttered. "Well, what? You believe that was her first husband." She didn't answer. "He's not dead." "Then," Rowan said, "not if that was him." It could have been a bluff. Could have. He agreed. But it didn't look like one. Didn't feel like one either, she murmured. He leaned closer. "If he's alive, Lena." Then her marriage to Silas wasn't legal, which means she inherits nothing. Exactly. They stood in silence. Then Rowan said, "Lo, you know what this means for your family." "I know," Lena said, but in her heart, a darker thought had begun to bloom. If that man was who he claimed to be, then someone in that room had a very real reason to make sure he didn't live to say another word. Section 4. Whispers in the Vale. 2 days after the party, the village had already done what villages do best. It talked, quietly. Of course. Behind teacups, behind shop counters, in the shadows of hedgerows and beneath the ticking clocks of parlors. But everywhere Lena walked. She felt it, the tug of unfinished sentences. The eyes sliding away a second too late. The polite smile stretched thin over sharp curiosity. The name Edward Lang was now sewn into the fabric of Marwood Hollow, like a snag that wouldn't stop pulling. Down at Ashby's store, old Mrs. Trent leaned in close to Marnie Marwood and said with a hushed voice and sugar crystals in her hair, "He looks like one of those men who's seen the worst of things, the kind that don't flinch when the doors slam." At the post office, Sarah Bell said, "He asked if we had any newspapers with his name in them, like he expected to read something about himself." And at the Red Fox Inn, Lena overheard a tradesman mutter, "Vane's a sharp one." But even he didn't look so sure when that fellow called the widow Rosie. Even Frances, Queen of Discretion, gave Lena a sideways glance over tea that morning and said, "If he's not her husband, then he's doing a convincing impersonation, which makes it either dangerous or very expensive." Lena nodded but said nothing, because something had shifted in her since the party. She couldn't stop replaying that moment. The name Rosie, the flicker in Isla's eyes, the stillness in Damon's shoulders, the electricity that passed through the room. It wasn't just a bluff. It had been personal. And then there was the letter. It came that afternoon. No return address, no signature, just 6 words in slanted handwriting. "He's not who you think." Lena read it twice. Then again. She turned the envelope in her hands, no watermark, no postmark, hand-delivered. She looked out the window, saw no one on the lane. But something was being considered. She could feel it, even if she couldn't see it. She shoved the note in her coat pocket and walked straight to Brackenridge Hall. The butler had long since been dismissed. Damon Vane answered the door himself, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled, a half-finished whiskey in one hand, and the scent of burnt matches in the air. "I thought we'd exhausted the pleasantries," he said without warmth. "I'm not here for pleasantries." He tilted his head. "Then do come in." She followed him into the den, leather chairs, thick curtains, and the pervasive sense of money trying to dress itself in old taste. "Where is she?" Lena asked. "Asleep at 3 in the afternoon. She tires easily." Lena studied him. "Or maybe she's hiding." Damon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We all hide in our own ways." "Miss Marwood?" She reached into her pocket, pulled out the note, and tossed it onto the table between them. Damon didn't even look surprised. "Anonymous threats," he asked. "Dry." "Warnings," Lena corrected. "Same difference." She stepped closer. Isla's first husband, Robert Vale. He was presumed dead in Africa, wasn't he? Damon's eyes narrowed. She believed he died of fever. Lena continued. "But there was no body. Only a report from local guides. And now, this man Lang, he calls her Rosie. He shows up, uninvited, and she nearly collapsed." "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm asking who he is." "He's a fraud," Damon said coldly. "A vulture. A clever one. I'll give you that. He knows enough to imitate. But Robert Vale is dead." "You don't sound sure." Damon's knuckles tightened around his glass. "Because certainty is a luxury, especially when the cost of being wrong is everything." He turned away and walked to the fireplace, tossing a match into the grate, though nothing had been lit. "I don't care who sent you that letter," he said. "It's bait. Someone stirring the water, hoping the fish will rise. I suggest you don't bite." She stepped closer. "I think he's here to make a claim. I think he wants to take back what he lost." "Then let him try," Damon said without turning around. "Let him go to court. Let him drag Isla's name through the mud. Let him ruin her peace. Let him tell the whole country that she's not a widow, but a liar. Let him undo everything she's rebuilt since the war." His voice cracked faintly at the edge of that sentence. Lena paused. "You care for her." Damon then turned. His face was impassive, but his eyes burned. "She's my sister." "That's not what I asked." Silence. Lena's heart thudded in her chest. If he is who he says he is, she loses everything. The inheritance, the house, the money, even her name. She becomes the woman who tricked a dying man into an illegal marriage. Damon stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, "I won't let that happen." That night, Lena walked through the empty road behind the village church, her boots crunching on loose gravel, her scarf pulled tight against the wind. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to keep moving, to burn off the feeling that something was wrong. Not just wrong, imminent. As she passed the edge of the wood line, she saw a figure. He was standing just outside the candlelit window of the vicarage, hands in his coat pockets, motionless. Edward Lang, watching, waiting. She froze, and then he turned slowly, as if he'd known she was there all along. They stared at each other across the dark. Lena opened her mouth, but he only lifted a finger to his lips, smiled without mirth, and disappeared into the trees. Chapter 3. Ill Will in the Air. Section 5. Games Beneath the Surface. Rain swept the hills like ink spilling across a map. Lena stood by the window of the Marwood farmhouse, one hand cradling a cup of cold tea, the other tracing a crack in the sill. Since the night she saw Lang vanish into the trees, sleep had become elusive. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle outside her window makes her heart quicken. Whoever he was, Lang wasn't just a ghost from Ela's past. He was a reckoning. And yet, what troubled her most was not him. It was Damon. She could still hear his voice in the sitting room 2 days earlier, that razor-calm certainty behind his words. "I won't let that happen." It hadn't been desperate. It had been resolved. And it hadn't been for justice. It had been for her. For Island, Lena hadn't meant to go back to Brackenridge Hall. But that afternoon, as the storm faded and the village sank into its late-day hush, she found herself standing once again at the edge of the property. No invitation, no excuse, just a question she could no longer ignore. How far would he go to protect her? The door opened before she knocked. Are we making this a habit?" Damon asked. One brow lifted. "I thought I'd take you up on that whiskey." He paused. "You sure you're not here for the tea and scandal?" She walked past him into the sitting room. "Maybe I want both." Damon poured 2 glasses and handed one to her without comment. They sat across from each other, the air between them taut, flickering like something about to snap. "I saw Lang again last night," Lena said. "Did you?" He was outside the vicarage, just standing there, watching. Damon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "You're not going to ask what he was watching," she urged. "I already know." "He's not going away," Lena said, "and you're not acting like a man who plans to wait for him to come." Damon leaned back in his chair, rolling the whiskey between his fingers. "I might consider it. If I were innocent." A sharp smile touched his lips. "You think I'm guilty of something. Lena, I think you're the kind of man who never waits for the punch to land. You throw it first. I've survived that way." "Survived what?" Damon looked at her for a solemn moment, and for the first time, she saw something behind the mask. A flicker of fatigue, of grief, or guilt. "You don't know what it was like for her," he said. "Married off to a man nearly twice her age. Alone in the jungle. Letters censored. Watched. Sent weeks late. And him, Vale wasn't what people think. He was cold, controlling. He kept her on a leash with a smile. She never said that. She never had the words for it. She came back broken. Lena. She had nothing. Then Silas found her, saw something fragile, and tried to protect it. I don't blame him. But now she's rich. And someone else wants a slice of it. You think this is about money, isn't it? Damon drained his glasses. Lang isn't here to file papers. He's here to bleed us slowly, one whisper at a time. And if he's really her husband, Damon didn't blink. Then he should have stayed dead. The words hung in the room like smoke. Lena rose, walked to the fireplace, and ran her hand along the edge of the marble. Her reflection in the mirror above looked back pale, conflicted, questioned. You could end this, she said. He looked up. Isla could speak to him. Publicly. Admit the truth. Whatever that is. You assume she knows it. Sazmki? She must. She doesn't. Lena turned. Then you do. He stood too now, closing the distance between them. His voice dropped. I know he left her in that country to rot. I know he used her, then discarded her like a thing. I know he faked his death because he didn't want the shame of divorce. But mostly, I know he doesn't deserve anything that Silas gave her. Not 1 pound. You don't know what he's really after. Damon's voice was low. I know what men like that want. It's not inheritance. It's domination. She escaped him once. I won't let her fall back. They were inches apart now. Lena stared at his face. It was a beautiful face, but sharp, made of blade lines and purpose. There was a kind of power to him that frightened her, and she hated how much it thrilled her, too. She's not the only one you're protecting, she said quietly. Damon blinked. What do you mean? I think you love her. His mouth twitched. She's my sister. That's not an answer. A pause. Then Damon stepped back, just enough to let the air return to the room. Be careful. Lena, he said, you're smart, but smart people get hurt worse when they fall. She held his gaze. Is that a threat? No, he said. It's advice. That night, Lena sat on her bed, fingers pressed to her temples, the whiskey still burning in her chest. Everything was moving. Damon Vane was either a man fighting off a predator, or the most dangerous kind of predator himself. And at the center of it all stood Isla, terrified, fragile, and possibly, just possible, playing them all. She reached for the lamp, and that's when she saw the envelope, plain, white, tucked beneath her door. No handwriting this time, just a folded note inside. 4 words. He'll die before morning. Section 6. The body on the line. The body was found just after sunrise. Lena was still in her dressing gown when the news reached her, delivered in hushed tones by Mrs. Trent, who arrived with a basket of eggs she clearly had no intention of selling. They found him by the tracks, she said, eyes wide, just past the trestle bridge, mangled, like a fox, caught in the wrong place. Lena didn't respond. She couldn't. The words from the note still echo in her head. He'll die before morning. She hadn't told anyone, not even her mother. Now it was too late. The constable from Wexbury arrived by noon, all mustache and stiffness and thick boots unsuited to the muddy lanes. He didn't know the village the way it knew itself. He didn't know that the postmistress used to be a nurse, that the pub owner once did time, or that the Marwoods never forgot a face or a debt. His name was Inspector Julian Gray, and he had the quiet look of a man who'd seen the aftermath of too many truths. He came to the farmhouse just before lunch. I understand you were at the party where Mr. Lang made his appearance, he said. Lena nodded. He wasn't invited. No. But he certainly made himself memorable, didn't he? He pulled a notebook from his coat. Where were you this morning? I was here. With my mother. Anyone else see you? I was asleep. Gray didn't write that down. Just tapped his pen once, lightly. Did you know the deceased? No. Did you recognize him? Lena paused. Yes. Gray raised an eyebrow. From where? From the party. And once, outside the vicarage. Gray made a note. Did he ever speak to you privately? No. Another pause. Then she added, he left a note. Gray looked up. A note. Lena went to the desk and retrieved the folded slip of paper. The 4 words were still there in ink. He'll die before morning. Gray read it. Twice. Who gave you this? It was slipped under my door. Last night. You didn't come forward. I thought it was a joke. A threat. I didn't know. You didn't believe it, Gray said softly. Until it came true. Lena folded her arms. Do you think it was suicide? Gray didn't answer immediately. He was struck by a train. But the position of the body, the bruising on the neck, suggested he may not have been alive when he hit the rails. Lena felt the room tilted slightly. Murder, she whispered. Gray snapped. That's what we're here to find out. The next call Gray made was to Brackenridge Hall. By the time Lena arrived on the pretense of delivering back a borrowed book, the drawing room was taut with tension. Isla sat curled on the chaise, eyes glassy. Her hands twisted a handkerchief into threads. Damon stood near the window, arms crossed. Gray's voice carried through the room like a low current. According to the village, you were seen arguing with Mr. Lang outside the Red Fox Inn 2 days ago. We didn't argue, Damon said flatly. He followed me. I told him to stay away. Did he threaten you? He didn't need to. His presence was a threat. Gray turned. Did you threaten him? Damon's jaw clenched. No. What about your sister? Did she speak to him? Isla spoke so softly, Lena almost missed it. He came to the house once. Gray turned. When? Yesterday morning. Damon was out. I answered the door. He said I owed him something. Gray waited. What did he mean? Isla closed her eyes. I don't know. He didn't say he was your husband. No, but he called you Rosie. Isla's hands trembled. He used to call me that. She whispered. Years ago. When I was married, Damon took a step forward. You don't have to say anything more. Gray held up a hand. She's not under arrest. Mr. Vane. No, Damon said. But she's under siege. Gray's gaze sharpened. Would you say that makes you desperate? Damon smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I've been desperate before. Inspector, I didn't kill anyone then either. Lena watched it unfold, the dance of veiled threats and practiced restraint. And all the while, Isla sat motionless, like a doll forgotten at a child's tea party. Her skin too pale, her lips pressed together in a line of guilt or grief or both. When Gray finally left, Lena lingered. Damon didn't speak to her, just poured another drink and walked to the garden door, staring out into the mist like something waited for him just beyond the hedgerows. Lena approaches Isla. I'm sorry, she said, about what happened. Isla looked at her, eyes shining with something close to terror. I didn't ask for this, she said. None of it. I never wanted. Her voice cracked. I never wanted anyone to die for me. Lena crouched beside her. Did Damon do it? Island flinched. I don't know what he's capable of anymore, she said. Lena's stomach turned, and as she walked home, through the fog-thick lanes, she knew only one thing for certain. This was just the beginning, because Edward Lang had come with the truth, and someone had buried it in blood. Chapter 4. The Fire Beneath Section 7. A quiet man with sharp questions. Inspector Julian Gray didn't wear his authority like a badge. He wore it like a coat, simple, serviceable, and impossible to take off. There was no blush to him, no grand speeches or slammed fists, just questions, quiet ones, asked with just enough space between them that people started answering before they knew why. He began with Francis and Jeremy Marwood. They lived in the oldest house in the Vale, a Georgian thing with ivy creeping over the windows like time reclaiming its territory. Inside, it smelled of beeswax and old paper. Frances met him with her usual grace, offered coffee she didn't drink, and sat with the poise of someone used to answer questions in drawing rooms. Mr. Lang, did you know him? No, she said, though I suspect I might. Why? Because I'm not stupid, Frances replied, crossing her legs. He knew too much. About Isla, about Silas. He called her Rosie. He wanted someone to notice. And he wanted someone to pay attention. Did you? I paid very close attention, Inspector. Gray paused. Did you consider the possibility that he might have been telling the truth? I considered that it didn't matter. She said, legally, financial, morality, truth rarely wins out. It's whoever survives the scandal. Jeremy sat beside her, silent for most of it. But when Gray turned to him, he flinched just slightly. You manage most of the family's legal affairs. Mr. Marwood. I used to, Jeremy said, but not anymore. Jeremy hesitated. Frances answered for him. Not since the inheritance was locked. Gray raised an eyebrow. Locked. Isla doesn't have control of the estate, Jeremy said. The money is held in trust. She has access. Yes, but only as a life beneficiary. It's tightly structured. The moment she dies, the principal returns to Silas's next of kin, meaning you and the others. Jeremy said, Lena, her mother, Rowan, myself. And if her marriage to Silas is invalid, Gray asked, then she never had legal claim. Jeremy said, and the estate reverts to the family immediately. Gray nodded slowly. So this man, Lang, had something to gain. Frances faintly fainted. So did we all. Gray didn't write anything, just closed his notebook and said, thank you for the coffee. His next stop was the farm. Rowan Cade met him with mud on his boots and dirt beneath his fingernails. The cows needed tending, and Gray was offered exactly 15 minutes of his time. I knew Lang was trouble the moment I saw him. Rowan said, why? Because he walked into a room like he owned it. Men like that always want something, and they don't care what breaks when they get it. Gray nodded. Did you speak to him? Only at the party. What did he say? Rowan shrugged. Not much. Enough to rip people. Enough to scare Silas. Gray studied him. Did you believe him? Rowan's pause was brief, but loaded. I believed he believed it. Gray let that settle. And you, he asked, would you benefit if he were dead? Rowan looked him straight in the eyes. Wouldn't we all? But the cracks show clearest at White Hollow. Lena was already waiting when Gray arrived, coat on, scarf half tied, eyes a little too alert. She let him in without a word and gestured towards the armchair by the hearth. He sat. She stood. "I want to be helpful," she said. "That's good," Gray replied, "because you're close to them all." "I'm not close to Damon," she said, "but you've spoken to him privately." "More than once." Lena hesitated. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed to know what I was dealing with." "And what were you dealing with?" She crossed her arms. "A man who would burn the world to keep his sister warm." Gray watched her for a moment. "You received 2 notes, didn't you?" he asked. Lena blinked. "How did you—" "One before the death, one after. I never showed the second." "No," Gray said. "But I know you found something under your door that night, and I know you're smart enough to keep it quiet until you knew what it meant." Lena didn't speak. Gray leaned forward. "What did it say?" She hesitated, then pulled the second note from a drawer beside the fireplace. This time, the handwriting was different, narrower, tighter. Gray unfolded it. "You can't protect them both." He read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it beside the first. "Do you know what this means?" he asked. "I think so," Lena said. "Enlighten me," she exhaled. "It means someone thinks I'm trying to shield both Isla and Damon." "Are you?" Lena met his gaze. "I don't know anymore." That evening, the Vale went quiet in the way only old villages do. The storm clouds broke apart. Mist clung to the fields. Lamps glow behind drawn curtains. But something had shifted. The constable from Wexbury had asked his questions, and the answers hadn't matched. Up at Brackenridge, the lights stayed on later than usual. A window on the second floor flickered with movement, then went dark. Down at the farm, Rowan Cade stood by the fence smoking a cigarette he didn't admit to having. And inside White Hollow, Lena sat at the kitchen table, staring at the 2 notes side by side. "He'll die before morning. You can't protect them both." And somewhere in the woods behind the village, someone stood very still, watching the lights go out one by one. Chapter 4. The Fire Beneath Section 8. A second silence. The second body was not found by accident. It was left to be discovered. A hiker and old gardener named Bellamy with bad knees and a weak bladder stumbled upon it in the early morning mist near the north edge of Brackenridge Wood, where the trees thinned into bramble and the earth dipped into a shallow, muddy hollow. Face down in the wet leaves, hands bound behind the back with a length of curtain cord, a blood-soaked wound to the back of the skull. No signs of a struggle, no signs of mercy. Inspector Gray arrived just after dawn. The constables cordoned off the area. The coroner arrived half an hour later, muttering under his breath. Gray crouched beside the corpse, his hat tilted forward, eyes cold. The victim was Reggie Stanton, a solicitor's clerk from Wexbury. Mid-30s, neat handwriting, quiet voice. Known, if at all, for being meticulous and forgettable. A man who disappeared into filing cabinets and emerged only when summoned. And yet, for some reason, he was now very dead. Gray spoke to the coroner first. Time of death, 6 to 8 hours ago, likely between 10 p.m. and midnight. Murder weapon, blunt force trauma, heavy object, possibly a rock, clean strike, no defensive wounds. Robbery. Nothing taken. Wallet intact. Pocket watch still there. Gray stood. The mud clung to his boots, like the case clung to his mind, heavier by the hour. What was a solicitor's clerk doing in the woods? He claimed. In the middle of the night, Lena heard the news before breakfast. Marnie Marwood had already started crying into her tea before Lena made it downstairs. She hadn't known Reggie Stanton well, but the tragedy of 2 deaths in a week had broken whatever calm she had left. "It's a curse," she whispered. "This family's cursed." Lena wasn't sure she disagreed. After dressing quickly, she walked through the veil, ignoring stares, questions, and the muted shock gripping every doorstep. She didn't go to the constable's post or the inn or the shops. She went straight to Brackenridge Hall. This time, the door wasn't answered immediately. And when it did open, it wasn't Damon standing there. It was Island. She looked worse than before, hollow-eyed, pale skin. A robe wrapped tightly around her thin frame like armor against more than just the cold. "He's not here," she said. Lena stepped inside anyway. "Then you'll talk to me." Isla didn't argue. She led Lena to the sitting room and sat, crumpling into the couch like a marionette with cut strings. "They said it was the man from the law firm," Isla murmured. "Yes. Why?" "I was hoping you'd tell me." Isla twisted the edge of her sleeve. "Reggie came here once, 2 weeks ago, to deliver a letter from Lang. He said it wasn't for Damon, just for me. He slipped it to me when no one was looking." "What did it say?" Isla hesitated. "It said he knew I was still married, and that he would prove it." Lena swallowed. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly, but the tone. It was cold. He knew the will. He'd seen the inheritance paperwork. He knew everything." "And you told Damon?" A long pause. Isla shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I burned the letter." Lena stood. The fire was rising again in her chest, the pressure of too many secrets, all leaking smoke. Someone knew. Reggie Stanton had that information. She said someone knew he was a liability. Isla looked up. "You think it was Damon?" "I don't know what to think anymore." But she did. Deep down, she did. Gray found Jeremy Marwood pacing the garden behind his office. "You were Stanton's supervisor at the firm, correct?" Gray asked. Jeremy nodded. "Did he seem anxious recently?" "Yes." "Why?" Jeremy hesitated. "He told me someone had offered him money. A private inquiry, he called it. Asked whether he could access an old probate record, Silas Marwood's specifically." Gray stilled. "And did he?" "I told him not to, but I suspect he already had." "Did he mention who paid him?" Jeremy hesitated. "No." Gray watched him. "But you have an idea." Jeremy closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the weight of decades had settled on his shoulders. He said, "Someone from within the family." By evening, Gray had the entire picture in front of him. 2 dead men, one the stranger with the claim, the other the clerk with the proof. 2 notes sent to Lena, 2 warnings. 4. And now only one conclusion remains. Yamo. Someone in this family wasn't protecting the truth anymore. Someone was eliminating it. That night, Lena returned home and found her mother in bed early. Lights off, shutters drawn. She stood alone in this kitchen for a long time, her eyes fixed on the notes spread across the table. She wanted to burn them, to be free of their weight. Instead, she lit a match and wrote something new on the back of one. Just 3 words. "Who's next?" Then the flame flickered beside it, And somewhere in the night, a window creaked open, and someone stepped out into the dark. Down. Chapter 5. Ashes in the Blood. Section 9. The fault line breaks. The drawing room at Brackenridge Hall was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that precedes an earthquake, not peace. Inspector Gray stood before the hearth, his coat still damp from the rain. The family had been summoned. No one had refused. Francis and Jeremy Marwood sat side by side, stiff and wordless. Isla perched near the window, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest. Rowan Cade leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. Damon stood alone near the liquor cabinet, pouring whiskey with an ease that suggested detachment. But Lena, seated nearby, saw the tension in his fingers. Gray cleared his throat. I won't waste time. 2 men are dead, both connected to a truth that someone in this room did not want uncovered. I intend to find out who. No one spoke, so he continued, let's start with what we know. Edward Lang appeared here claiming to be Isla's husband, and he wasn't lying. A sharp breath escaped Isla's lips. I confirmed the marriage record through the consulate. Rosalind Elwood married Edward Lang 7 years ago in Sierra Leone. There's no record of annulment, no divorce, no official declaration of death. The marriage is still valid. He turned to Isla, which means your marriage to Silas Marwood was never legal. Isla stared at him as if he'd struck her. And your inheritance, Gray added, was technically acquired under false pretenses. Francis inhaled suddenly. Jeremy reached for his handkerchief. Rowan just asserted, bloody hell. Damon said nothing. Gray pressed on. Lang was blackmailing Isla, or planning to. He had a letter delivered to her via Reggie Stanton, the solicitor's clerk. He looked at Isla again. You burned it. Her voice was barely audible. Yes. Unfortunately for you, Reggie didn't burn the copy he made for himself. We found it, along with a note that implicates someone else entirely. Gray turned slowly. To you, Mr. Vane. Damon looked up from his glass. His smile was thin, defensive. Let me guess, he said. A forged confession. No, just a bank record. Reggie Stanton received 2 payments in the last month, both untraceable. But one came from a shell account that originated in your company's name. Damon's jaw twitched. You were paying him, Gray said, for silence. Damon said nothing. And when that didn't work, when Lang kept pushing you, followed him into the woods that night, and ended it. Still silence, but it didn't stop there. Gray went on. Reggie knew too much. So you arranged to meet him, to silence him too? No, Damon said quietly. Gray raised an eyebrow. No, he repeated. Damon shook his head. I paid Reggie to delay things. That's true. I didn't want Lang ruining Isla's life. I didn't kill him. Then who did? Damon looked around the room, slowly, deliberately, and then his eyes settled on someone. Ask Rowan, he said. The room snapped. Rowan straightened, uncrossing his arms. What? You knew about Lang before anyone. Damon said, you saw him at the Red Fox. You followed him. You hated what he did to Isla. Everyone hated him, but not everyone followed him into the woods that night. Gray watched Rowan now. You were the only one unaccounted for, he said. No alibi, no witnesses. I was home, Rowan snapped. Asleep. Like Reggie Stanton, Damon shot back. Lena stood now. Stop it. But the shouting had already begun. Frances was yelled at Damon for implicating family. Jeremy was insisting no one had proof. Isla was sobbing. Only Gray remained, watching, listening. And then he saw it. The smallest thing, Rowan's left hand. It was shaking, not with fear, with rage. I didn't mean to kill him. Rowan growled. Silence fell like a blade. Gray stepped forward slowly. Lang or Stanton? Lang, Rowan said, his voice cracking. He was laughing, saying he'd come back for her, that he'd strip her down again, leaving her ruined. I told him to shut up. He kept going, so I hit him. One blow, but it was enough. He looked at Isla now. I did it for you. Isla buried her face in her hands, and Stanton Gray asked. Rowan hesitated. No, that wasn't me. Gray's eyes narrowed. Then who? Rowan's gaze flicked toward Jeremy. Too late. Gray turned sharply. Jeremy was already rising from his chair, pale and shaking. I needed to stop him. Jeremy stammered. If Lang was dead, the only threat was Stanton. If he gave that letter to the press, if the firm was implicated, I would have lost everything. I didn't mean for it to go so far. I just meant to scare him. You hit him from behind, Gray said. Jeremy nodded. He didn't even turn around. The room spun in silence. Two killers, two motives, one family, shattered that night. Brackenridge Hall stood dark. Rowan Cade was led away in cuffs. Jeremy Marwood walked out without speaking, his career already dead before dawn. Isla watched them both go from the window, her face unreadable. Damon stood behind her, silent. You knew, didn't you? She whined. Not until today. But you suspected. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at her. Because I knew what it would do to you. She nodded once. And what about you? Damon, what will it do to you? He didn't answer, but when he left the room, he didn't return. And in the hallway, Lena stood quietly, watching it all fall down. Chapter 6, The Last Letter. Section 10, What's Left Behind Weeks Past. The veil held its breath, and then slowly exhaled. Life trickled back into habit. Markets reopened. Gossip moved on to softer subjects. But the shadow of what had happened lingered in the spaces between conversations. It clung to doorways, big fences, to the stones beneath muddy boots. Brackenridge Hall stands mostly empty now. Rowan Cade was awaiting trial in Wexbury. His face had made the local papers. Family loyalty turns to violence. The headline read, Jeremy Marwood had resigned quietly from the law firm. No trial for him. The evidence was circumstantial. The confession retracted under duress. But the damage was done. His name, once a currency in town, now bought nothing but silence. As for Isla, she remained at the hall, alone. The will had been invalidated. The trust dissolves. All claims to Silas Marwood's fortune were tied up in a legal labyrinth. But Isla hadn't fought for it. She hadn't fought for anything. And Damon, gone, no note, no goodbye. Just a letter to Lena, posted from a city far north and folded with the precision of a soldier who knew how to leave things behind. Lena, you were right not to trust me. I didn't kill anyone, but I let the truth rot under my nose. Maybe that makes me worse. I thought I was protecting Isla, but I was protecting myself from what we've all become. Keep your mother safe. Stay out of the mud. Yours? Damon. Lena read it twice before she burned it. She didn't tell Isla. It was raining the day Frances Marwood asked to see her. The drawing room at White Hollow smelled of lavender and damp books. Frances sat straight in her chair, a shawl drawn tight around her shoulders. Her hands, once graceful, now trembled as she poured tea. "I wanted to thank you," she said, without meeting Lena's eyes. "You could have protected us. You didn't." "I didn't destroy you either," Lena said evenly. Frances shivered, faintly. "That's the part I'm most grateful for." They drank in silence for a while. Then Frances reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, worn envelope. The paper was yellowed. "The seal is broken. This was sent to me years ago, shortly after Silas died." Lena unfolded the letter slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Lang. It was brief, blunt. She was never mine. But she was never his either. The girl lies, and lies. One day, it will bury her. There was no signature. Lena looked up. "Why didn't you show this to the police?" Frances smiled again. "Because I didn't want them to know I believed him." Lena left the house that afternoon and walked out into the fields. The mist clung low to the ground. The path toward the trestle bridge was still roped off with faded police tape, fluttering like ribbons of warning in the breeze. She stood at the edge of the tracks. The wind tugged at her coat. She remembered the first time she saw Lang, how he looked at Isla, not with love, but with possession. How every step he took into the village felt like someone dragging the past up from the grave. And she thought about how it ended. 2 men dead, 2 secrets silenced, and still nothing left behind but echoes. She pulled the last note from her pocket. You can't protect them both. The truth was, she hadn't protected either. But maybe that wasn't her fault. Oh, maybe the trap had been set long before she ever walked into it. That evening, Lena returned to White Hollow and found her mother sleeping in the chair by the fire, her book resting on her chest, her breathing deep and even. She sat beside her and let the silence hold. For once, there was no letter at the door, no footsteps in the garden, just the fire and the steady rhythm of something finally begins to heal. Not forgotten, not forgiven, but no longer hunted. The veil had taken its price, and this time it will stay quiet.